Good evening, I'm Garfield Burford, and a warm welcome to this special edition of ABS Presents the Alfa Nero Files. We welcome all our viewers all over the world on television and online, as well as listeners on ABS radio and other stations broadcasting this syndicated program. Over the next 2 hours, we delve into the chronology of events surrounding the government's seizure and sale of the Alfa Nero super yacht. The vessel was sold in July last year, with documents provided by the government confirming the sale price as $40 million. The buyer, YM Thunder One Shipping, based in Malta. This evening, we're laser focused on facts and evidence, not conjecture or speculation. We're adding light, not heat, to this discussion. Provable details, not salacious pontification. This is what separates journalism from gossip. You could call it being a marionette of the facts and evidence, a modality some radio commentators would do well to adopt. There is currently a filing in U.S. federal court in which a Russian citizen, Yulia Gurrieva-Motlakov, is seeking discovery into the financial affairs of some Antiguan officials. She has not sued the government in the U.S. courts, but wants certain information disclosed. Gurrieva-Motlakov is the daughter of Andrei Grigorievich Guriev, a Russian billionaire who the U.S. says initially owned the Alfa Nero super yacht and who has faced sanctions in both the U.S. and in countries of Europe. Now, in support of the claim for disclosure, Gurrieva-Motlakov has engaged a private investigator. He makes certain allegations about Antigua, Barbuda and the country's officials in a declaration to the U.S., but we have seen no supporting documentary evidence for those allegations. The investigator identifies himself as James T. Hayes, Jr., and he says in the preamble to his declaration, we'll show you what he says now. In one of those indications, he noted, except as otherwise indicated, all statements in this declaration are based upon my personal knowledge and experience or upon my discussions with or review of work product of other investigators' work on behalf of applicant as directed by applicant's counsel in the course of the Antiguan investigation. He also says, unless otherwise publicly disclosed, this declaration does not reveal the identities of sources who have spoken to applicants' investigators. He continues, insofar as they are within my own knowledge, the facts and matters set forth herein are, to the best of my own knowledge and belief, true, end quote. So, we interrogate the chronology of events in the Alfa Nero Files. Our guests this evening, to my immediate right, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Honorable Gaston Brown. To Prime Minister Brown's right is Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan, the lead attorney for the government in this matter. And to Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan's right is Port Manager Darwin Telemack. A bit later on in our 2-hour program, we'll be joined by Financial Secretary Rasona Davis-Crump. Later in the program, we'll entertain your questions via telephone and Facebook. Now, when that time comes, we ask that you keep your questions brief and bereft of any potentially defamatory comments. There might be an inclination for individuals to have wisecracking comments. We invite you to put those on other programs. This is a serious discussion. Good evening to my guests. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Prime Minister Brown, Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan, and Port Manager Darwin Telemack.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Very good. So let me start with Prime Minister Brown. Prime Minister, if you were to preside over this entire saga of the Alfa Nero seizure, sale, again, would you do that the same way?
Absolutely. When you consider the options that we had, in which the Alfa Nero got stuck here for about 3 years, and the risk of that ship being literally damaged by a hurricane or a fire for that matter. In fact, if you recall, there was a major fire at the dock where the Alfa Nero was berthed. And if the ship was not acquired by the government and we did not have people manning that ship, it would actually burnt and it would have sunken within the Falmouth Harbor. And that would have been devastating, not only the cost to remove that vessel, but also the impact on the yachting industry. It would have created a fundamental economic problem for the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. So when we look at the risk of having that yacht literally sinking within the harbor as a result of a hurricane or any other event. In fact, the ship was also deteriorating rapidly because it was not being maintained. We had to do something, and when you look at the cost as well, in which over a 2-year period we would have spent nearly $2 million upkeeping that yacht, and that does not include the fuel and the docking fees and even other charges, of which ultimately the government would have been liable had we not acted. So in order to justify the monies that we spent to keep the crew on the ship and to maintain the yacht, we literally had to acquire the boat. We could not have justified spending millions of dollars on a yacht that we did not own. And I recall on one occasion, even before we acquired the yacht, the captain had indicated to us, he met with cabinet members, that he was going to abandon the ship because at that time they were actually owed close to $1 million, and there were no end in sight with the sanctions, and he said that they could not continue manning the yacht and not getting paid. In fact, at that time they could not even buy food. So when you look at the options that we had at the time, they were very limited, and there was a need for us to bring that liability to an end, and certainly to first of all, in the first instance, acquire the yacht, which clearly was abandoned. I mean, and we're speaking about the ownership here. You'll recall that we actually advertised globally. We asked the owners of the yacht to kindly come and get the yacht. No one came forward. So in terms of ownership, it was abandoned. There's no doubt about it. And the port manager would have done the necessary things to acquire the yacht as an abandoned yacht. And it then became the property of the state. And after it became the property of the state, we could have justified paying the millions of dollars and even guaranteeing additional liabilities, including the fuel from West Indies Oil Company and also the berthing cost, the berthing facility at Carlo Falcone's marina. So if we had to do it again, considering the options that are available, we'd have done it again, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for those opening comments, Prime Minister. Getting opening comments from all the two guests, let's go to Darwin Telemack. Darwin Telemack, if you were to, as port manager, preside over the entire situation, the entire saga again, would you have gone about it the same way?
Well, good evening, Garfield. Good evening to your listeners. I'm instructed by legislative instruments, and I have no option but, when I'm provided with those instruments, to act in accordance with those instruments. So I would have no choice if I am given instruments that says my actions are required within the framework of my responsibilities to act. So I would have no choice.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the Senior Counsel, did the government go about this the right way? Did it follow everything to the T?
Well, let me first of all say that as counsel on the matter, nothing I say is intended to suggest that I'm seeking to prejudice the judge's ruling on the case. But as the Prime Minister put it, what choice was there? The vessel, the Prime Minister omitted to mention, was sanctioned by the vessel, but at the time when it was docked and the harbor was sanctioned by the Americans. And the owners or the purported owners or those who claim to be the owners couldn't touch the vessel, could not expend monies on it. It was being simply deteriorating in a very pristine area and very economically valuable and vulnerable area with Falmouth Harbor. To have a vessel like that there with the risk of it sinking or catching a fire, because they could not repair the vessel. There was damage done to the vessel. They could not repair. They tried to send parts from Europe. The French customs officers seized it. They could not maintain the crew because the crew had left. They were not being paid. They couldn't do anything. So the question was, how much longer was the government supposed to wait before it acts? When no one in Antigua and Barbuda, or even in the United States, would have known just how long the sanctions would have lasted for. And it posed an inherent and threat to the environment. And the other point that I needed to mention, there was no question about the vulnerability of Falmouth Harbor. If a vessel of that size, not a small yacht, a small boat, but a vessel of that size, sinking in the vessel due to lack of maintenance and so on. So my thought process throughout the case was, but what choice did the government really have? How much longer were they supposed to wait? And I should also indicate there was collaboration through the ambassador, Sir Ronald Saunders, and Paul Riker, the American lawyer who was retained to assist us, with constant dialogue with OFAC. So OFAC knew what was happening, certainly in relation to the tender and the selection of the persons who could bid, because a number of them were rejected by. So once the sanctions were lifted, the government was at liberty to sell the vessel. And what happened was that Sir Ron Saunders, and I think Paul, but I think it's Sir Ron, had informed OFAC of the intention to sell it and to whom and for the price. And there was no objection from OFAC. But I think the Prime Minister's phrase about what else could we have done is a theme that should run throughout this discussion, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Yes, Darwin, tell me.
Amplify a point that Tony made. The Prime Minister alluded to it as well. First of all, a vessel can only sail into and out of a harbor if it is flagged by a flag state and if it's registered and in class. The ship was deregistered and delisted. It could not move.
And uninsured.
Right. Yes, as soon as you get delisted and deregistered, every P&I insurance club is going to move away from you because you can't have any insurance. You don't need it. You can't move. So essentially, the vessel was sitting there, and the only way it could move legitimately is it had to be reflagged and re-registered. And well, from what we knew is the owners who we asked, and I'm sure we'll get to that later, we asked to come and get it, couldn't. They had shown for over quite a few years that they were not able to come to make the adjustments to it. But critically, the draft of that ship coming into Falmouth Harbor left very little clearance under the keel. We probably had about maybe a foot clearance under that ship coming all the way up to into the harbor. That Falmouth Harbor is the busiest harbor we have in Antigua. The most ships go through there. They're not as large, but the volume of ships that go through there is significant. And one ship left abandoned because the crew said they were leaving would have certainly created a significant navigational risk. That risk would be one where if it was abandoned, it ran aground, blocking the channel. To get a ship of the size required to remove that size ship would require us to dredge the entire Falmouth Harbor channel to get a ship deep enough to come up to remove it. It wasn't a situation where we couldn't have had that situation happen because there was a storm when in fact I had to deliberate with the Prime Minister, even in and the Cabinet, in its on-flag state. We had to remove it from there when the storm was coming to ensure that if this thing broke off and ran aground, that we were not going to have a problem. We actually lived through the possibility of a significant challenge happening.
Correct.
And I think that really gives credence to the fact that if they were not going to remove it, because that's the crux of it. If you want it, come and move it. And we can speak to the legislation later, but that was really, come and take it away. They couldn't. And when they couldn't, the state acted.
And I ask, did we have any other viable option?
We're going to come, of course, we're giving you extensive reportage on this issue. We're taking a chronological look about what happened with the Alfa Nero super yacht. So after the opening comments from my guests, Prime Minister Brown, Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan, Port Manager Darwin Telemac, we can now go into the specifics and the chronology of events, starting with when did the vessel reach Antigua? When did it come to Antigua? And why did it come here? Darwin Telemac.
The vessel arrived from St. Martin. I don't want to get too much into the details of that, but there were some challenges because St. Martin is a European country. Europe at that time had sanctioned the owner, and they were sanctioning all his assets. So I guess the next best port to move to would be a port that is familiar with, and so it came across to Antigua. Coming here, there were other issues that emerged, because not only were they sanctioned when they came here by the Europeans, they came under American sanction. And so now they were both EU and American sanction on the vessel that came here in 2022, thereabouts. And once those sanctions hit, something started happening where the ship was literally unable to be accessed by its owner. And that went on for quite some time until the crew basically said, we can't do it anymore. And that ship was well equipped with a lot of food, a lot of drinks, lots of stuff on there. They used it. They used it. And it also became quite clear that they were in such difficulty that the owner of the marina started having to feed them, provide vehicle for them. And under SOLAS as well, I think he figured that his responsibility was necessary. SOLAS being one of the IMO regulations that says safety of life at sea is paramount. So he figured he would help serve the guys, but there was no help coming in to the ship was literally there. It became delisted, it became abandoned, and it just sat there from 2022 onwards.
Of course, let's bear in mind that 2022 was when Russia invaded its neighbor Ukraine. You're saying the sanctions were as a result of that, correct?
Yes, that was clear, yes. Right. The EU and the US government started sanctioning Russian oligarchs, and apparently they associated this vessel with this oligarch, and they implemented the sanctions.
To be clear, the vessel, when it came here, it was sanctioned. It was under sanctions.
When it left St. Martin, it was under EU sanctions.
Good. Prime Minister, now that the vessel is here, the owner can't access it because it's now under sanctions. What was your government's first thought?
Well, as I recall, the FBI had come to search a ship on one occasion, and it was a significant issue for the U.S. government. In fact, they would have met with us. And I'll go as far as saying, too, that there are U.S. officials who asked us to sell the ship. So when we looked at all of the options and the fact that the ship got stuck here and that it was a major liability, not only an environmental liability, but a significant financial liability, and the fact that the sanctions could have persisted for many years. In fact, the sanctions are still there. They have not been lifted up to now. So just imagine if it was here for yet another year. I believe we would have had to spend at least maybe another $2 million. And you have to understand, too, that as the charges on the ships increase, the value of the ship would have reduced. And then it would have created a problem for us in terms of the cash flow to continue to make those large payments to maintain the ship. I mean, we're not a wealthy country. I mean, we're a small island state with very limited resources. And to come up with maybe $10 million a year to maintain a ship of that value, there's no way we could have sustained it. So selling the ship became absolutely important, quintessential. So we then approached the U.S. government after we had held discussions with them about selling it. Clearly, we could not have sold the ship because it was under U.S. and European sanctions. And we then employed the services of an attorney to assist us, Mr. Paul Reichel. He worked with our ambassador in Washington, Sir Ron Saunders, and I believe we had Tony as well subsequently on the case. And we got the sanction lifted, and the sanctions were lifted specifically to allow our country to sell the ship. There was no other purpose why the United States lifted the sanctions.
To be clear, Prime Minister, the U.S. asked you or suggested that you sell the ship. This was in 2022?
Correct. And then in 23, we went to Parliament, made certain changes to the laws, and we applied to OFAC to lift the sanctions. And then we subsequently had to write to the U.S. Treasury as well to get approval for prospective buyers. Even when we held the first auction, we had to submit the names to the U.S. Treasury to get the approval to make sure that these individuals were not sanctioned, because they made it abundantly clear that we had to exercise caution to make sure that another sanctioned entity or individual did not end up with ownership of the ship. Even when we got to the stage of selling it to the Turkish gentleman, Mr. Yildirim, in 2024, again, we had to write to the U.S. Treasury to get approval for them to clear him as a suitable person to whom we could have sold the ship. So this is a matter in which there was close collaboration between the U.S. and Antigua and Barbuda to literally rid the country of what was clearly becoming a significant liability for the country. And had it sunk, then clearly that would have been a fundamental problem, environmental, social, and economic problem for the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda.
We'll come to the legislation in a short while. Darwin, I'm going to come to you shortly, but the legislation, of course, was amended to ensure that the country could actually seize the vessel. We'll come back to that shortly. But in relation to, Darwin, let me ask you, what if the vessel was just left there by itself? No crew, the vessel is left there. Some individuals have said, why not leave the vessel? Why have to spend so much money on it each month to take care of it? What would have happened if the vessel was left there without anyone on it, without any crew, without taking care of it?
Okay, so Garfield, I'd like to strengthen the point the Prime Minister just made to give some greater clarity to what happened. We were told we got permission to go ahead and sell the vessel by the U.S., and then they said, we want to get the list of the names. And I remember I had calls from, all over the world, countries far and wide. We submitted 32 completed packages. Some people didn't want to send their passports. I'm not sure the Prime Minister remember that. They didn't want to send their names. So the people who were very serious gave us their bio page, their profile, and their offer. We had to take each of those. I sat with my secretary up late in the evening, sending them to OFAC. OFAC got 30-something names. And OFAC, they're the ones, when we did that first auction, they're the ones that actually came back and said, you can only sell this vessel in this auction to these 4 people. It wasn't something that we had no choice in who we were going to allow to participate in the auction. They said. Now, it just fortuitously turned out to be that they rejected the people from Australia, from Sweden, Switzerland, Europe, everywhere, and they picked 4 Americans. I mean, it was their picks. So the 4 Americans were the ones who submitted bids based on what OFAC permitted at that time. So I just wanted to strengthen that point.
You want to give the range of the bids?
Yeah. And what we got was, we had bids ranging from 55 to $66.5 million. There was the range we got. And there was one that came in at 28 million, yes. There was one that came in at 28 million. I remember that one very clearly.
Correct.
And so we had 28, 55, 56, and the winning bid that came in at 66.5 million. And as a matter of fact, those bids came, but on the day of the auction, 1 or 2 of those people decided, well, we're not even going to participate in the auction. So we literally had 3 people in there, and that was a little surprising too, because one of them just decided they were not going to participate.
Of course, the former Google chief executive, Eric Schmidt, won that bid. He eventually pulled out. We'll get back to that. We'll get to that shortly. Continue, Darren.
To answer your question, a ship stays alive. A ship, we look at it as an organism, stays alive if it's fed. It has to be fed with fuel, has to be fed with hydraulic systems. People have to keep the engine running. It needs to stay alive. If it dies, it becomes a derelict piece of machine. You literally can't bring it back. It's just going to wither away. Now, what we learned, which was not something that I was even aware of, is that if the cooling system on that yacht, let's say it was still being given fuel, but the cooling system, the air condition went off, the molding on that ship that would emerge in about 5 to 10 days would make the ship unusable. No one could go inside. The mold would be so dangerous that you'd have to vacate the ship. It would become totally useless. And so we had to, one of the reasons why we were so perplexed, even at some points, was the generators were running for so long. And the cost of repairing one of those generators, according to the engineer who was on board, was about $400 and something thousand just to, we were challenged to be able to do that. So we were just hoping that they stayed up, because we didn't want the AC to go down, because then the ship would be in trouble. Had the ship died, the prospects of having a vessel of that size with 1 meter water below the keel, sitting in your most pristine, most commercially viable harbor, with a storm of a 2, 3, or 4 category coming at you, you're going to have a problem. And as a matter of fact, where the ship was moored on that marina is about 80 to 100 meters from the center of the channel. So breaking its chain, it's going to sail into the deeper part of the water, so it would go into the channel, it would twist and turn, fall to the bottom, and now the channel is blocked. That was my greatest concern. I mean, there were some discussions about the ecological issues and all of those. Those are stuff that day, but I'm tasked with managing navigation, and I knew if that ship had gotten away after it died, we would have the entire Falmouth Harbor blocked away. And so we don't have another location in Antigua where we could move people to. So that means for that period of time, Falmouth, with our largest marina in Antigua, being the Falmouth Harbor Marina, would be shut down. The Antigua Yacht Club and all the others there, including the one for the Baileys, all of those would be shut down. And that was something that we really had to take some into consideration in trying to see how quickly we could act.
Okay, we're going to come, of course, to the point at which it was sold, then, of course, why the bidder pulled out, Eric Schmidt pulled out, and so on. Prime Minister, in relation to another crucial point of the sequence of events related to the legislation that your government passed to ensure that you had the authority to seize the vessel, what kind of legal advice did you get in relation to going that route?
Well, I'm going to let the attorney handle it. We had a U.S. attorney who literally helped us. And Tony, you were on the case at that time too?
Yes.
Yeah, so
yes,
you'll speak to the legal aspect.
Okay, Anthony Asiban.
No, I think the legislation was drafted in order to deal with a particular situation and generally. Because the vessel was abandoned, the condition in which it was in, it simply could not stay. And something had to be done to authorize its seizure, and in order to protect the harbor.
Let me just ask you very quickly, was during that point, when the vessel was sitting in Falmouth Harbor, did anyone who owned the vessel before, did anyone reach out to the government?
Well, they couldn't. They tried to write, they wrote suggesting a few things, but they couldn't, because it turns out that simply because of the existence of the sanctions on the vessel, there was nothing that they could do financially or otherwise to move the vessel out of the harbor. They couldn't touch the vessel because of the sanction. They couldn't fund it. They could not even send money to the government to take care of the vessel.
Sure.
Right? I mean, that was the situation that the government faced. And I think the legislation was appropriate. It applied to ships generally as well. And it had to be done. It simply, I think that if it's one thing we need to get across to the public today, this was not a situation where somebody woke up and says, I want the boat, let's go and sell the boat. It was months. It was constant concerns about the condition of the vessel, the imposition of the sanctions, the abandonment of the ship, the inability to pay for fuel, to pay for this, to pay for that. It was simply there as a potential threat that would have been destructive in the most important harbor that Antigua and Barbuda has.
So the vessel was there. The government passed legislation to ensure that it could seize the vessel appropriately under law. Prime Minister, during that point, when there was a notice given, international notice sent out, was there any response from Yulia Gurrieva Motlakov or anyone associated with her?
Can I answer that, please?
Sure.
Flying Dutchman has responded. I do not think Yulia did.
No, Yulia never did.
Yulia did not. But the point is, in accordance, they would have had to come to tell the port manager that we are going to be sending a crew and money to maintain the boat in order to get it out of the harbor. Correct?
Correct.
And they couldn't do that because
correct.
the sanctions were there.
Correct.
And it was one of these situations where, and the other point that I need to make too as well, hopefully you may get to it, if not, I better deal with it now. parallel with the inability of the owner to be able to move the vessel, they and Julia tried on a number of occasions to get injunctions to stop the sale of the vessel. Okay? The one Flying Dutchman went to the Privy Council. The Privy Council said there was no error on the part of the judge. Your only remedy, if you succeed in your case, would be damages. So the ability to recover the boat was lost. The same thing with Julia. Julia applied to stop the sale of the vessel. She lost. She went to the Court of Appeal and she lost in the Court of Appeal, and she applied for leave to appeal to the Privy Council and she lost that as well. So the vessel was sold with the sanction of the authority of the court's orders that permitted the vessel to be sold. So there was no selling it in the middle of the night and so on. The vessel was there. There was litigation taking place. The owners and Julia tried to stop the sale of the vessel, including Halley as well, if I remember correctly. Yes. And they all lost. Yes. So what was he to do when the injunction applications against him have failed? He had to do what the law required him to do. Right.
Very, very sequentially, Garfield, the legislation was handed to me. It clearly stated what has to happen. I was supposed to issue a notice in the international environment asking the owners to come and remove the vessel. That was done. We sent out that notice, and someone called me directly. Says, I won't call his name, I'm such and such. We are the owners, and he called the company's name, Flying Dutchman, which is also important to understand that at that time, at least from what we know, the vessel belongs to Flying Dutchman. That's what he said. When he told me that, he was telling me, don't sell it because it belongs to us. We were not selling it or not selling it because of who owned it. The challenge was the owner could not remove the risk. And telling me that I own it, don't move it, when you can't move it for the last 2.5 years, is saying, well, just continue to allow the risk to exist, and if you end up damaging and hurting yourself, well, it just happened. Well, you can't operate that way. So my indication to him was and I did testify to that in court as well. I asked him to come and remove it, and that was all the legislation said I should ask. He didn't. The time went by when he was supposed to remove it. No one came to remove it. So the law says 10 days. We counted the 10 days. We executed on the day that it was supposed to have been done, where we seized it, not for the purposes of arbitrarily saying we're seizing it. We're seizing it to do a few things. You can't flag a ship if you don't have ownership of it. You can't register the ship if you don't have ownership of it. So we first, and that's why the legislation actually allowed for that. We had to seize it, to flag it, register it, and now that has happened, it becomes a commercial, the option of commercially executing a sale becomes possible. All right? We couldn't get the insurance on it because of the sanction that was done. I know we tried. We couldn't get it done. But still, there were people who were prepared to go ahead and come to purchase it, and that's how the auction came through.
But it's important to bear in mind that during that period of time, the vessel was subject to a block property sanction by the Americans. Yes. And the owners, especially persons related to Ulicor, what's his name? What's his father's name?
Andrei Grigorovich Guria.
Thanks for the translation in Russian. Couldn't touch it. And the government would have remained in a state of suspended animation had it not acted, because nobody knows when these sanctions would have been removed. So action was required to preserve and protect Falmouth Harbor and the economy of Antigua and Barbuda.
Eric Schmidt then wins the bid. He eventually backs out. Why did he back out, Anthony?
I think he backed out because of the litigation that was taking place. And at the time he backed out, the application for the injunction was in full swing. I don't think they had been decided yet.
No.
And he was concerned that if he went through with the transaction, the vessel would have been tied up with an arrest or something like that.
That's correct.
Professor, what happens then after he backs out, Eric Schmidt backs out? What's the government's calculus now? What were you thinking?
Right. The second bidder came subsequently and offered a significantly low amount. If I'm not mistaken, it was about 30 million.
Yes.
Mr. Halley. And we rejected it because it was too low. And we had other bids, but again, they were not acceptable. So the boat would have stayed here possibly for at least, what, another year?
Yes, ma'am.
Without a buyer.
A little over a year.
And again, remained as a significant liability for the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. And it was only last year, I believe July, somewhere around there, that we then had an interested party in Mr. Yildirim, who got in touch, or his agent got in touch with Mr. Telemac. And, you know, we got a bid up to 40 million US. And I believe that Mr. Yildirim would have started at about 25 million.
He did.
He made a comparison. He had bought a similar yacht, similar size to the Alfa Nero. You remember the name of it, Mr. Telemac? Anyway, a similar size yacht, but it was at least 7 years younger than Alfa Nero. And he made the point that he picked it up for about 28 million, and therefore he did not think that the Alfa Nero, which was not properly maintained, was worth more than 25 million. And now the idea that after skillful negotiations, primarily by Mr. Telemac, we got him up to 40 million US dollars. A recommendation was made to the cabinet, and the cabinet accepted the 40 million US dollars, which at that point was easily the largest offer that we've had. There have been many others who came and offered 20, 25 million, but clearly we were trying to maximize the offer, and we settled, that is the cabinet settled for the 40 million US, which was the best offer at the time.
When we come back, I promise to hold the point, Senior Counsel and Port Manager Darren Telemac. When we come back, we'll continue, of course, our discussion focusing on the sale of the Alfa Nero super yacht. So we've given you some background, sequence, context. Now we get to the point where the vessel is sold to YM Thunder Shipping based in Malta. We'll talk about those details, and then we'll present what the government has indicated as its documentary proof. So far, the person who has supported the application or the filing in the US federal court, who is a private investigator, has provided no documentary evidence. Had he provided documentary evidence, we would have provided it to you on the show. It's fair and balanced. So we're providing the documentary evidence we have available. When we come back, much more on the Alfa Nero Files. Stay with us right here on all ABS platforms, as well as on several other broadcast outlets taking this syndicated broadcast. Much more next.
Here this year, big session.
You what? So wait, you're hardened?
Here this year.
Yo, wait a second, go ahead.
Here this year.
Every Sunday, the news in dialect. Check out, man.
This one is sweet, me. I say to you that there is a dire global health challenge at our gates in the global south. We have experienced an exponential rise in cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory and infectious diseases, cancer, diabetes, air pollution, mental health challenges, malnutrition, and all of this while the climate crisis has impacted us and our environment and will continue to do so. We, the citizens of the Caribbean, are faced with a simple choice. What will our future be?
Be viewing Caribbean Medical TV on this station.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're in tune with the Alfa Nero Files on ABS. A special ABS TV presents. Our guests are Prime Minister Honorable Gaston Brown, Port Manager Darwin Telemac, and Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan. We're unpacking, deconstructing the sequence of events which led to the sale of the Alfa Nero super yacht in July of last year. We've now reached to the point where the vessel was sold to YM Thunder One Shipping, a company based in Malta. Prime Minister, the sale of the vessel, did it have to YM Thunder and to Mr. Yildirim, did it include the U.S. authorities and did it include other international partners? Did they vet this partner, this person who bought it?
The ship I spoke about earlier, the other ship that was purchased by Mr. Yildirim is the Axioma. And the answer is yes. Again, we had to write to the U.S. Treasury to get approval, to get Mr. Yildirim and his company approved. So at every step of the way, we worked in tandem with U.S. State Department and U.S. Treasury. And we obtained the approvals and we effected the sale. Plus, we would have circulated all of the documentation. So the information covering the sale proceeds and the contract itself, all that information has been filed with both the U.S. State Department, Treasury Department. I believe, too, that even prior to this request for disclosure, that information was filed with Antigua.news court. Am I correct, sir?
Yes.
All the details, yes.
Yes.
So the information...
The only thing was that names and accounts were
Well,
redacted.
accounts and names are redacted for confidential reasons. I mean, it would have been improper to, publish people's, financial information. So other than those redactions, all of the information was published and was in the public domain. I was asked questions in Parliament at least on 2-3 occasions by members of the opposition on Alfa Nero. The amount of the sales price was disclosed at $40 million US. That is documented within the Hansard of the Parliament. So they knew. They also knew too that a commission was paid of $1.8 million US to the brokerage firm, which is a traded U.S. company. And again, the full details of the spend. There was a document that was prepared, a spreadsheet prepared by the financial secretary.
We'll show those shortly.
And I'll add here too that our financial secretary is certainly a lady of integrity, and I don't know why any right-thinking person would think that she will go and fabricate a statement to cover anyone. I mean, her responsibility is to preside over the financial affairs of the country and to make sure that all of the governance structures or the integrity of the country's finances remain in place and to report accurately. I mean, she's the one who presides over the budgetary process and for the documentation to me as finance minister to take to Parliament. And I just think that it is extremely cheap politics for anyone to speculate that there could be any fabrication or any false information published in that statement. And again, that information is in the public domain.
We'll go to some documents that the government has available. One is the apostille, and we'll show you that on our screen. We'll bring that up for you. As that comes up on our screen, I'll ask Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan. Senior Counsel, what about those who might argue that this could be fabricated? What's your view?
Well, let me be honest with you. I can't read it from here.
Signed by Cecile Hill, Registrar, is it?
I can't read it.
Yes, it was signed by
I think I know
the court,
what it is.
as well as an attorney. We'll actually bring it forward to the screen, yes. This is the apostille, Senior Counsel.
Okay.
Right, so we'll bring it forward. But in other words, the legitimacy of that document
cannot be questioned. Simply cannot be questioned. And there's further information. Now that I can see it, I can confirm that it was done in accordance with the law of Antigua and Barbuda. So I don't see how the integrity of the document or the transaction can be questioned.
There's the view that the vessel was sold for more than $40 million. Prime Minister, this was in the declaration as part of the supporting the filing by Yulia Gurieva-Motlakov, by James T. Hayes, Jr. He seeks to essentially question the amount of money that was paid for the vessel. What's your take?
Can I jump in here, Pierre?
Sure.
That's a farce.
I find it
That's
laughable.
a figment of a delusional mind to suggest that within the context of sanctioned property and with all the other surrounding circumstances that somebody would even remotely think of executing a transaction where $10 million just disappears out of it. It never happened. And during the trial, the issue of $40 million was never an issue. It has come about now because there's an attempt to tarnish the Prime Minister's reputation and that of the country, aided and abetted by some persons in Antigua and Barbuda. When we get to the independent, to the review of the investigators' report, I'll point out some of it.
So if I could intervene
Promise,
here.
please.
In the first instance, they said that 10 million of the 40 million sales price was missing. Maybe they did not recognize that the information was already in the public domain, but we then circulated the documents again within the media. We even sent the information to the international publication Associated Press with the redacted accounts for the various beneficiaries, all of the wire transfers that were sent. So after they recognized that even the contract itself was published, stating clearly that the boat was sold for 40 million, they then changed the story and decided, well, it's not 40 that was paid, it was 50. And then they said too that apparently there's some collusion between the buyer and the previous owners, that the previous owners, Euler, would have paid 50 million. However, only 40 was disclosed. Well, if that is the case, why did they bring forward the transfer details of the $50 million that they spent? Again, it's all a fabrication. And what is really laughable about it, and at one point we had a discussion within the cabinet, and I was trying to figure out, how can people believe this type of fictional narrative? And we do know that, members of the opposition have colluded with them to create these fictional narratives. But I could not understand, knowing that it is fiction, why would you believe it? And then there's Minister Joseph, Somalian Joseph, who said to me that there is this willful suspension of belief in which people believe in these fictional narrative, obviously to promote their own agenda, and sometimes, I guess, for maybe entertainment purposes to amuse themselves. But what seems to be happening now is that having fabricated information, for some reason they're telling themselves that they have something substantial and they're going to bring down the Prime Minister, they're going to bring down the government. Now, if it's for entertainment purposes, I can understand, but when people start to believe that type of fictional narrative, then I think something is fundamentally wrong. But as Tony says, it is a total fabrication designed specifically to undermine our country and certainly to defame me. Even the issue about this fishing expedition in which they are asking for disclosure. Now, let me make it abundantly clear that there's no litigation against me or any family member. There's no ruling against me. There's no trial. What has happened is that they're now gone on this fishing expedition, fabricating all sorts of stories about fictional ownership of assets. Totally untrue. In fact, I don't own any assets outside of Antigua and Barbuda. And they're using all these fabrications, and we're going to provide some evidence to literally dispense of some of these lies, to literally say to a U.S. judge that they should allow for a subpoena, or the judge should allow for a subpoena, and that the judge should allow for disclosure so that they can go into, or they can go into the U.S. payment system to determine whether or not they that this is necessarily an issue for the court per se. What they're trying to do is to shame us in public, to defame us, to undermine us in the international community. And that is why I would have said very clearly that I reserve my right to take these individuals to court, and I certainly will. And I just want to caution our local people in particular. I have an obligation as the Prime Minister of this country to protect our citizens. And I know some of them, they get extremely wild and they will follow these baseless statements and then land themselves in legal problems. Now, I don't enjoy suing my own citizens, but if you're going to get outlandish and accuse me of all of these outlandish allegations. Not a scintilla of evidence has been provided. I want to emphasize here, with all of these outlandish allegations, not a scintilla of evidence has been provided on any of them, because they're all a fantasy, fabrications.
Robert, so this James T. Hayes Jr., we won't go into the details about his declaration to the U.S. court because, as I said, we have no evidence. We protect ourselves in the media by having factual, documentary evidence in black and white that can stand up in a court of law. These are allegations for which no evidence has yet been provided. He's indicated that you're a wealthy man, you're a multi-millionaire. You are $700 million.
You're underestimating my wealth.
He says you have a net worth of about $700 million. What's your view?
Well, I think they got it wrong because, you see, just before the 23 elections, according to members of the UPP, I brought in $4 billion in a plane. So if I had $4 billion there and then the other assets, then clearly they are understating the $700 million. So I think they're embarrassing me in that case to be accusing me now of only having $700 million. They need to make up their minds. But the reality is it's not true. I mean, it's just so outlandish that ordinarily it would not even require a response. But our U.S. attorney would have said to me that, look, there's no precedent of any claimant for that matter, or any individual being able to literally get a court to get a prime minister, sitting prime minister, to disclose his financial information. I mean, the financial information of all individuals, it's confidential information. So we're as quite willing to just allow them to knock themselves out and to do all the searches. I've been advised by our attorney, Paul Reichel, that we should defend it. And the other thing about it, too, there are lots of innocent people who are also involved. There's a gentleman who rented my home at Jolly Harbour. What's his name there now? Alki David. Yeah, he's actually a very wealthy man. He actually is a beneficiary of a trust that owns the largest Coca-Cola factory in Kenya. He rented my home for over a year. They have added him to the litigation. The only relationship he has had with me is that he rented our Jolly Harbour home. They've added my son, who is not a public official. They have added my wife. They have gone as far as adding a former girlfriend of mine. Now, we all know that information came from domestic sources. They added 2 companies that don't even have bank accounts. I give an example, Farmer D.G. Brown. That's a local company that holds the shares for myself and my sons in a farm that has been publicly disclosed. It has no bank accounts anywhere in the world. They added COVID Communications Limited. That's a company that holds our shares in Point FM. Again, it has no banking relationship here or anywhere else in the world. And I'm giving you all information. They also added a company by the name of COVID Development Company. That account has not been operational for probably about 8 years. It's dormant. It's an account that was at RB, Royal Bank of Canada, now with ACB. They also had IF Antigua Limited. That's an account that belongs to my son, a company. And the only transaction that they would have had in terms of a transfer was the rent that my son collected for a property there from the same Alki and others at Jolly Harbour and at Barnacle Point. So we really have nothing to hide, but again, I've been advised that it should be defended and not to set a precedent in which individuals feel that they can just frivolously come up with these fabrications and then get the opportunity to go into people's accounts to create mischief. Even here in Antigua, I have a personal account, a loan account with ECAB. And if you want to make that available, just to at least take ECAB out of free. I don't mind publishing it. I got a loan of $500,000 in ECAB. I think it's $300-something thousand balance.
You provided that to us, which you presumably got from ECAB. We actually have a picture of that.
They have it in the litigation that, not litigation, the disclosure document that I got a loan of millions of dollars from ECAB so that I could wipe out all of the farmers locally. I mean, all sorts of, really horrendous information that are not factual. And again, I'm prepared to make them publicly available. They said too that I'm trading Venezuelan oil and that Weakers has imported Venezuelan oil. You should have a letter too from West Indies Oil Company.
In breach of the sanctions.
Confirming, in breach of sanctions, that West Indies Oil Company has not purchased any petroleum products in Venezuela since 2018.
Let's put that up, by the way, in relation to, this is a letter that was written by the Chief Executive Officer. We'll bring that forward to the screen so that you can have a look at it. And this is, of course, a letter that was written by Gregory Georges, who is the Chief Executive Officer of West Indies Oil Company. And he's indicated at what point it was that the last time that this country had any sort of trade in Venezuelan oil, and he said that that was in 2017. Since then, he's indicated there has been none. We'll bring that forward to the screen so you can have a look at it.
I have no bank accounts in Europe, in North America. I have no one fronting for me. I have no company that owns any bank accounts. I have no shares anywhere other than shares in domestic companies. And they spoke about Odebrecht as well. And I want to respond to that. Now, Tony, you are familiar with this Odebrecht story. This is a situation involving Minel Bank, which operated here for a decade, exclusively under the UPP administration when Harold Lovell was the finance minister. As I said, exclusively. By the time we came to government in 2014, all of the money laundering that we were involved in, they laundered hundreds of millions of dollars to bribe people globally. It happened under the UPP government. Story broke. And what seemed to have happened was that members of Odebrecht in Brazil decided that they wanted to get the prime minister to prevent the flow of the criminal information with all the bribery that took place at Minel Bank under UPP, to stop the flow of information to Brazil. And guess who they got on to fix it? And not me, they came to Naka, they couldn't come to me. They went to their friends well met. So you had this former ambassador, known as Louis Franca, who was appointed by Harold Lovell and Spencer during the UPP time. I mean, we didn't discontinue his appointment, but he was appointed by the previous administration. He had a strong friendship with Harold Lovell, Casroy James. At one point, he traveled with them to sell government securities and so on. So when they wanted to get to me, they solicited the assistance of Harold Lovell, of Casroy James and Louis Franca, and they arranged a meeting at the Biltmore Hotel in Miami. And by the way, you should have documentation to that effect. I sent it to you. So you can actually read that section of the...
We've actually had it available in relation to our screen as well. Perhaps we also have to bear in mind that whatever matters on the litigation, we will stay away from those matters because they're subject to say. But this says, so Suarez, and this is from an article. So Suarez, who had a reputation in
By the way,
office...
they're quoting the court documents.
Okay.
This is what was said in court, and it was carried by Bloomberg.
Okay. So Suarez, who had a reputation in the office as a man who did what it took to get the hard jobs done, went to Louis Franca, Antigua's honorary consul in Brazil. Franca had spent almost a decade overseeing Odebrecht's financial affairs on the island. Suarez asked him for help with a plan to persuade Antiguan Prime Minister Gaston Brown to block Brazil's request. To get things rolling, Franca invited a respected Antiguan lawyer and consultant he knew, Casroy James, to sit down in Miami for a talk.
So the respected Antiguan lawyer is Harold Lovell. And I want to ask the people of Antigua and Barbuda, what's the probability of Gaston Brown doing a corrupt deal with the leader of the opposition, the then leader of the opposition? So, and if the leader of the opposition knew that I was involved in anything, you don't think you'd have made information available? What has actually emerged is that the then leader of the opposition, Harold Lovell, was on the Minel Bank Odebrecht payroll and was paid $4,500 US a month.
Do we have evidence of this, Roman?
I do. And that's what I'm saying, sir. I published it before. So I want to make it abundantly clear. I don't know these crooks. Not even Louis Franca, even though he was an ambassador, never met him. He had a relationship with Casroy James and Harold Lovell. And if anybody needs to account, it should be Harold Lovell and Casroy James as well as Louis Franca. Now, I want you to also read an article you have there, which is very important, because the head of ONDCP, Colonel Croft, another man of integrity, would have made it abundantly clear that at no point Gaston Brown or any member of my government approached him to stop the flow of information, and that ONDCP acted in accordance with the laws of Antigua and Barbuda and sent the information to Brazil. But what seemed to have happened, the crooks did not know that the information was already sent. So when they were hatching their plans, and again, I'm not accusing nobody of anything, I'm calling it plans. It didn't include me. So I want to make it abundantly clear to the people of Antigua and Barbuda, when it comes to integrity, Gaston Brown can stand with any other leader anywhere in the world. And I have a policy, anything corrupt, I ain't touching it. So when you are on about Odebrecht, ask Harry Lovell.
ONDCP works with Brazilian authorities influenced by no one, and this is from the Office of National Drug and Money Laundering Control. That's ONDCP. The director of the ONDCP, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Croft, has stated that neither, and this was from December 28, 2016, the director of the ONDCP, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Croft, has stated that neither he nor any member of the command of his organization received any instructions from any official with regards to delaying or not providing documents requested by Brazilian investigative authorities regarding the activities of Odebrecht and a bank in Antigua, i.e. Minel Bank. The ONDCP director's statement follows an allegation that a high-level government official had been requested by an intermediary to refrain from providing to international authorities various banking documents that would reveal illicit payments made by the Division of Structured Operations on behalf of a company called Odebrecht. All right, so there is.
And I want to make one final point on that issue. At no point was I sued or interrogated over Odebrecht. My name only featured because they said that Harry Lovell, Kazroy James, and Louis Franca were to approach me to stop the flow of information. And as ONDCP would have indicated, the information was sent. And I want to make it abundantly clear that neither Kazroy, Louis, who I do not know, I never met up to this day, or Harry Lovell ever approached me about any such thing. And there's no way that they could have brought any such discussion to me without consequences.
Before I go to a quick break, here you, Prime Minister. By the way, before I come to both of yourselves for your quick final comments before we take a break, there is the banking information that you have made available, Prime Minister, in relation to ECAB, and this is a loan of over $500,000. We'll put that up on the screen as well, and we'll bring it forward so our audience can see it. We were skittish about putting the Prime Minister's personal banking information. He indicated he has no problem. This is the loan from ECAB. Could you talk about this, please?
And you know the thing about it, right, is that they have also sued ECAB as well. ECAB, well, not sued, but they've asked a disclosure as well. For ECAB. They've enjoined them in the disclosure. So this is just a fishing expedition, and I'm saving them some of the trouble. You know, I mean, again, I don't have to go this far, but I have nothing to hide. As I said, I don't have any real estate overseas, neither in Florida nor in, or let's say in North America or Europe. My son has a property in Florida that he has owned for the last 10 years, a decade now. I've been there once, probably about 5 minutes when he showed it to me when he bought it then, and never been back there, never slept there. So again, you know, I have nothing to disclose. I really have nothing to defend here, you know, to be honest. You know, this is just total fiction, and it's a fantasy of the local, or let's say our political opponents here, who are literally now colluding with foreign entities to undermine our country. In fact, you know, the way we see it, you know, I mean, these guys are literally promoting sedition within the society, using misinformation to stir the emotions of our people and to create chaos and confusion. And again, what they're doing here against the state in terms of undermining the integrity of our country and potentially subjecting the country to, you know, knee-jerk reaction for de-risking and other consequences, I think it is just so unfortunate. I mean, we can't, as politicians, you know, want power to the extent that we're willing to burn the country to the ground to become kings and queens of the ashes. There has to be some, at least, restraint in terms of how we, you know, take action that could potentially undermine the state. It's one thing to try and undermine the Prime Minister, to defame the Prime Minister, but when it comes to hurting the country, I mean, I think that politicians ought to, you know, think a little more responsible and to understand that ultimately when you hurt the state, you're hurting innocent people. And you know, the interesting thing about it is that now they have colluded with the foreign entities to defame and to undermine. None of them taking responsibility. I mean, I know that if I was a member of the opposition and I unearth serious information about the Prime Minister that is involved in any corruption, I'll stand up and say, yes, I have the information and I'll take credit for it, but I'm neither taking credit nor responsibility.
Okay, Prime Minister, we're going to a break now. 30 seconds for you, Darwin. You leave us at the end of this segment. Your take quickly on the declaration, because your name is also called in it.
I was instructed. I acted. I acted properly.
You often never get any
very
money.
Transparently.
You got any money?
I got no money at all.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister in July, was it July PM or June or July of last year, said, well, we will give you a little honorarium. And not even that has materialized in any way.
Yeah, it's not an honorarium. No.
These are little,
Even if you were paid an honorarium for going beyond the call of duty, it would have been from public resources, not from Alfa Nero.
What I'm saying is that hasn't even happened.
Exactly.
So there is absolutely no way. And he did say it's a little thing. We don't have anything to do. Just a little to show our gratitude for your hard work. That was it, and that never materialized. So I don't know what they're looking for.
Okay, Darwin Telemack, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You'll be replaced by Rasuna Davis-Crump, who is the Financial Secretary, who joins us at the end of this segment. Let's go to a break now. When we come back, much more on the Alfa Nero Files. Prime Minister Brown stays with us, as does Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan. We'll be joined by the Financial Secretary next, as we look at how the funds were used, the $40 million, and what's next going forward. Upcoming, stay with us.
Something that's affecting us all, youth crime and violence.
It is easy to feel helpless, like we can't change anything, but that's not true.
We have the power to shape our communities and our future.
It starts with us. We need to be the role models we wish we had.
Education is key, not just in schools, but learning skills, finding mentors,
and opportunities. We need to create and seek a positive alternative to crime.
It's about choices. Every day, we can choose a different path.
Supporting each other is crucial. We are stronger together.
If you see a friend heading down the wrong path, speak up. It's not snitching, it's saving a life.
Remember, our actions impact not just us, but our families, friends, and entire communities.
We can break the cycle. It won't be easy, but it's worth it.
Let's challenge the narrative. We're not just another statistic, we're change makers.
Every small positive action counts. It all adds up.
We are the present and the future. Let's make it a future we are proud of.
Together, we can build safer and stronger communities.
The change starts with us. Are you in?
No one likes to bring an end to a good time. But when we litter our environment, we cut short some of the best experiences in life. Let's keep the good times coming. Protect our future. Don't litter.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're in tune with the Alfa Nero Files. A full assessment and a chronology of events in relation to the government's seizure, sale of the Alfa Nero vessel, and now its response to allegations of impropriety. The government says there is absolutely no impropriety in relation to this matter. It has also provided documentary evidence of the sale of the vessel for $40 million. We should indicate that James T. Hayes Jr., who has provided a declaration in support of a filing in a U.S. federal court, has not provided any documentary evidence of any of his allegations. We're careful about going into detail about those allegations. The matter is still sub judice, and there has been no documentary evidence in relation to that. But there is concern about whether or not the vessel was sold for 40 million or 50 million. We now have joining us Financial Secretary Rossona Davis-Crump. Prime Minister Brown still with us, as is Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan. Thank you so much for staying with us, Prime Minister and Senior Counsel. Sure. Welcome, Rossona Davis-Crump, Financial Secretary. $40 million has been indicated on the documents that we've seen, the apostille, as a sale price of the vessel. What evidence do we have to confirm that in addition to the apostille, it was sold for $40 million?
Well, the evidence I have, good evening, Kathy, good evening to your viewing audience. The evidence that I have is based on our account at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, because that's where the funds were deposited. As you would have indicated earlier, there's 1.8 million that was paid to the broker. The balance was deposited in our account at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, 38.2 million. That's my evidence.
We'll put up the use of the funds, and you just walk me through very quickly a summary, please, FS, in terms of the use of the funds. We'll put that up in terms of the use of those funds. We'll bring it forward so our audience can see. This is the revised version. This is the latest version in relation to making sure that all of the funds were accounted for. We'll bring that forward to the screen. But FS, please give me a summary. Thanks.
And the FS is the author of this document.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we start with, as I indicated, the sale price based on the agreement between the seller, Government of Antigua Barbuda, port manager, and the buyer, 40 million US. As indicated, 1.8 million brokerage fee, that was deducted. And then on the 18th of July, 2024, $36 million was deposited to our account at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. That I have evidence of, that I can see. I would have received a report from the central bank indicating 36 million was deposited on July 18th, 2024. Next, as I indicate there, 2.2 million in September. On September 5th, to be exact, 2024, also our account at Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Again, I do have documentary evidence for that, and that would have been shared with all relevant parties. So we start with what would have been deposited in the government's account, and that is when my involvement begins.
Okay. So the money went in two tranches, 36 first and then 2.2.
36 first and then 2.2.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to talk about the use of the fund. We're going to put back up that shortly. But has there been any indication from Northrop, which is the broker, who actually made sure the sale was possible to Yildirim? Because if the vessel was sold for 50 million, the broker is going to feel shortchanged because they needed more money. They should have gotten more money. So has there been any indication, has Northrop said, we need more money because the vessel was actually sold for higher than you said it was?
No.
Okay. Let's go back to how the funds were used. So let's go back to the document, and you can just walk me through. You don't have to go into all the details. We'll actually show it so our viewers on television and online can see. But you can just give me a summary. Yes, a summary.
Oh, okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So as you would indicate, I thought you were showing us.
Yes, yeah, we are. Yes.
So you would see
we
that
need to
there are
talk
a number
about
of
something
different
that's affecting us
categories of
all.
payments.
Right.
Yes. As I've indicated, we got $38.2 million in total. The first, but before I go into this, I want to point out as well that the process of getting to here, where we're making payments, starts with a policy decision on how the proceeds of the sale would be spent. That is not a decision made by a single individual. There's a process whereby we are expecting funds, and I like to liken this to when we got some SDR funds from the IMF in 2022, in the middle of COVID.
These are special drawing rights.
These are special drawing rights, yes. A decision has to be made as to how we're going to spend these funds because we didn't budget for them. And the process is Cabinet looks at what's coming in and a decision is made. How are we going to sell? How are we going to utilize these resources? What are some critical payments that need to be made? This is exactly what happened with these funds. So the first order of business, I got instructions by way of Cabinet decision. These are the areas in which we should apply these funds. First one being, of course, as you see on the document, payments or reimbursements in respect of the Alfa Nero crew fuel, supplies, and other expenses, anything related to obligations and liabilities that would have accrued during the time that the Alfa Nero was in Antigua. And the total amount, as we see there, is 9.5, well, 9 million, let me give the exact number, $9,592,33.32 US. That is what was allocated and spent on any matters related to liabilities related to Alfa Nero when it was in Antigua. That includes, if you look at the second from the bottom under that category, a critical one is in respect of the crew. I know there was discussion earlier about the crew. That too was a matter that was being litigated. So we had to deposit those funds with the High Court. And so those funds would sit there until the matter is settled and whatever is due to the crew would be allocated and paid over to the crew. You will see legal fees, payment, they mentioned fuel earlier as well, $694,385.19 for West Indies Oil Company for fuel supplies. So this is what was done in that first category. Next, so again, coming out of the decision for Cabinet, after we've settled the amounts that are due to, for anything related to Alfa Nero and those expenses, next is we have other payments we determined. We had a fiscal gap of somewhere close to, for the first half of 2024, close to $81 million US. And the decision was made by Cabinet, let's allocate those funds to address some of our fiscal gap, our funding gap for the year. And that involved covering a number of debt payments. So again, we would see several debt payments in respect of ECCB, World Bank, Caribbean Development Bank, and that total was $29,510,094.29 US. That's how those funds were spent. Now, if you notice in that as well, there are some payments in respect of land acquisition. Again, these are related to some judgment debts too. So ultimately, the government determined there are a number of critical payments that need to be made, some debts and other matters, and we made those payments to cover some of those expenses.
Did you actually spend more than the 40 million US though? Because I'm seeing there 40.9 million.
Okay, so let's think of it this way. We got this, as I said, 38.2 million. That is what came into accounts. We have a number of debts related to Alfa Nero as well as other debts that we determined we were going to pay. They're not all going to add up neatly to 38.2 million. So clearly, 38.2 million allocated to all of these, and of course, out of the consolidated fund, other funds would be allocated to cover the amounts. I don't know why that's so hard to understand.
So 40.9 million was what, in terms of the total spend from this?
When you look
in addition to funds from the consolidated fund?
Of course, yes.
When you take into consideration the spend on the boat, $10 million US in 2 years, even if you divide it by 2, and you suggest $5 million US a year to maintain that boat, I want to ask the people of Antigua and Barbuda, if we had to hold that boat for a few more years and have to come with $5 million US a year, from whence will that money come? And even on top of that, the boat was not properly maintained and was depreciated in value. You can understand that if it held it for any long period, any protracted period, the boat will then become a liability to the state. So selling was the only viable option.
We'll put back up the apostille, so that's the use of the funds, and so it was spread between paying for the vessel's upkeep while it was here in Antigua and Falmouth Harbor, and then of course the rest of it was for other expenses, including paying down on the debt. This is the apostille. We'll actually bring it forward and scroll down, because on this document, which has of course the apostille on it, it talks about the $40 million that was spent. Again, for our audience, that was actually paid for, the vessel was actually sold for that. For our audience, let's be absolutely clear. This is the only documentary evidence we have. Mr. Hayes, James T. Hayes Jr., who has made a declaration in a U.S. federal court, has provided no documentary evidence to support his claims. We have seen no documentary evidence to support any claim that the vessel was sold for $50 million. If Mr. James T. Hayes has that documentary evidence, he's certainly not providing it. So this is the apostille, and Arthur Thomas, Notary Public of Antigua, Barbuda, signs off on it. If we could actually scroll down to the bottom of it, and of course, there is, it's also, walk me through this, please, Senior Counsel. Senior Counsel Athsman.
I don't really know too much
about it.
So
it's validated by the Registrar of the High Court, Cecile Hill. That's a signature at the bottom.
And we'll go down, all the way down to the end of the document. I'll just ask the control room to go all the way down to the very end of the document, which talks about the 40 million. No, there was actually another, there's another document which we'll provide, which speaks to the 40 million as well. So
there's a contract.
What we have is that documentary evidence. We have had no other documentary evidence to support any claim that it was sold for $50 million. Again, this show is about facts and evidence, what we can prove. If Mr. Hayes Jr. has any other evidence, he has not supported it.
So there's a contract of $40 million that you ought to share with the public. You know, whenever you enter into any such sale, there's a formal contract document. The contract document did not say 50, didn't say 40 plus 10, it's 40 million. Now, Mr. Hayes, the so-called private investigator, his assertions are not based on facts. They're what you call double and triple hearsay. So it's like Giselle Isaac told Harold and Harold told Jackie, and it just continues down the road, you know, hearsay, double and triple hearsay. No facts, not even a scintilla of evidence. Now, they make the claim that they are aware that they have evidence that the boat was sold for $50 million US. Well, present the evidence. I mean, if that is the case, why are they going on a fishing expedition? Clearly, it's not true. It's a fabrication, and it's really an abuse of the court process. And all this is literally designed to do is to embarrass, to defame. But at the end of the day, they probably don't recognize that you know, we're as transparent as they come. And that is why I'm certainly here to account to the people of Antigua and Barbuda and to reassure all Antiguans and Barbudans that you know, we acted with probity, and they can be assured too that Gaston Brown will never betray your trust. I will always make sure that I respect the trust and confidence that the people of Antigua and Barbuda have placed in me as their Prime Minister, and to ensure that public resources are utilized exclusively for the development of the people of Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you very much, Sir. Let me get from Senior Counsel Astafan. You've looked at the declaration that was filed by Mr. Hayes Jr. Generally, what's your take?
Well,
there are several allegations made.
Well, I'll highlight some to show you how ridiculous the situation is. First of all, there is not one of the allegations made were made without a reliance on sources told me or opposition members of the party told me. Every single allegation is introduced by I'm being told this by sources.
Please continue, please.
Can I go ahead?
Yes.
No, I'm just saying the integrity of the document starts by the fact that there's no statement of fact. There's no evidence of any fact. Quite apart from any documentary evidence, there's nothing. Everything is based on hearsay. What it is by members of the opposition party told him. What it is that sources told him, and so on. And a document like this would not survive in the courts of Antigua and Barbuda because sources are not identified, and there's no statement that I am informed and verily believed to be true that X is the case, supported by some documentary. It's like they went to a rum shop and listened to young fellas talking and put it down into writing. And I'll give you an example. They said that the Prime Minister has substantial holdings in WEOC. Really? WEOC shares for the last how many years have been traded on the stock exchange?
Correct. Public company.
That's one. The CIP, that the Prime Minister does not conduct due diligence on source of funds. That's the furthest thing from the truth. The CIP has one of the most stringent due diligence processes in the OECS. And I say so as a citizen of the OECS. And since the first signing of the 6 cardinal principles by the Department of Treasury and in the United States and the heads of government, more stringent procedures have been put in place. The other one is the Chofsky matter. The Prime Minister has been fighting tooth and nail to extradite Chofsky. to revoke his citizenship. Tooth and nail. I'm on the case. I can tell you it's been going on for years. And this man is accusing the Prime Minister of taking money from Trotsky to protect him. Now, I don't know how schizophrenic we can get when I know for a fact that the Prime Minister has given instructions to, in compliance with the law, to revoke citizenship and to extradite. And how at the same time is he being given money to protect Trotsky?
It's their own national housing.
They said you own national housing, that you control the NAMCO. They don't realize that you're the Minister of Finance, you have the authority to do that. But the worst one is with David Dorset. They put David Dorset in that report, my dear beloved friend and brother David, and accuses him of being the Prime Minister's lawyer. Nobody has done more cases for and or against the government than David Dorset. But the worst part about it is David Dorset was and is the lawyer for Yulia in the Antiguan proceedings. He started the matter with Hill and Hill. They brought in King's Counsel to lead him. He's the junior to King's Counsel. In all the applications, in all the trials, throughout the entire proceeding. And he drags David Dorset's name into it to try to create some kind of situation. I find it...
And he said, I own Global Bank too.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't stop, eh? It's madness.
But the worst part, if you're going to make allegations like that, you must be man enough or woman enough to state the facts upon which you rely. It cannot be, I relied on... Let me give you an example.
Yes, sir.
Let me give you an example. Brom's heightened interest in the potential sale in the context of politicians from the opposition political party, United Workers' Party. The Prime Minister is having a heightened interest in the vessel because it poses a threat to the harbor and to the economic situation in the harbor, not because of anything the opposition said.
And he said United Workers' Party, the United Progressive Party.
And then in paragraph 27, they speak of getting information from the opposition again.
So it does quote, and for viewers who have not seen this document, it does quote the leader of the opposition, Jamal Pringley, does quote him in that document.
Yeah, and it's sources from Antigua. Somebody says, with a degree of certainty, Prime Minister has substantial shareholding in New York. Well, where is that? Where are the shares? Why is it not on the stock market? It's not. Because he does not own shares in New York or substantial holding of shares in New York.
Not a single share.
Well, not a single share. This is a sickening document crafted to attack and destroy the reputation of the Prime Minister, whose government made a decision to protect the integrity and the environment and the economy at Falmouth Harbor, to do, with the consent of the Americans, to do what is right to protect the public interest in Antigua and Barbuda. No, I'm not prejudging what the judge is going to say. The judge has to make his decision based on the facts and the law. But I'm responding to this document. And I find it a little difficult to swallow that when you travel through the Caribbean countries, whether it's Dominica, Antigua, and other countries, St. Lucia, you find members of the opposition willing to collaborate with external forces with the singular purpose of seeking to get some kind of political advantage from it.
Let me ask you, Senior Counsel, because the government has retained counsel in the United States, the indication from the government is that this is not, this is to ensure that it has an opportunity to respond if needs be. Will the counsel in the U.S., would you recommend that they seek that the court strike out that document, given that it doesn't have any sort of document?
Well, I spoke to Paul, the Prime Minister knows that I speak to him regularly, and I saw the motion, and I commented on the motion that they're going to file in the United States.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, Friday, I'm sorry, PM. And they actually described this document and this application as an act of extortion. A destructive act of extortion that had nothing to do with any judicial proceedings or any proceedings whatsoever.
Who was described as that?
The American lawyers who drafted the motion to be filed tomorrow.
The lawyers representing the government.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and it's important the public...
Act of extortion.
And it's important the public hear that, the other side of the story, that American lawyers who are expert in this particular field have come to the conclusion that this is an act of extortion against the Prime Minister, and a calculated attempt to destroy him and the reputation of the country out of, and I'm putting in my interpretation, out of mere vengeance.
So, Tony, up to today, I had one of the agents call me from the U.S. asking if I would like to sit down and settle. I said, no such discussion. I'm wasting my time with your fabrications. So, knock yourselves out if you want to believe it. If you all think you're getting 1 red cent, because this is part of the strategy, apparently, to throw as much mud as possible and then try and extort. In fact, there's a particular one there by the name of DeLuca. I mean, he has been attacking me publicly. I've never seen an attorney behave in such an unprofessional way. And he's one of the persons that I'm going to sue. In fact, it seems as though, too, that he feels as though that if he can shame me with all of his fabrications, that maybe he probably believes I have 700 million for real, so I'll probably come and say, take 20.
Well, Gaffy, before you move on, the facts that the Prime Minister is addressing is important because in the motion that's going to be filed tomorrow, which, as I said, I have seen and looked at, the Americans rely on the fact that DeLuca has gone on social media to attack the personal character and prime ministerial character of the Prime Minister, as reflecting the true motive of this campaign against the Prime Minister, as opposed to a genuine judicial issue. And they're right. They're absolutely right.
And you know, one of the things he said too, that Antigua is going to lose entry into the United States because of this issue. So you can see, again, he's not only trying to hurt the Prime Minister, you know, not only trying to hurt me, he's also trying to hurt the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda.
Before I come to, thanks, Prime Minister, before I come back to Financial Secretary Rossona Davis-Crump, Senior Counsel, in your extensive experience, have you seen any document like this that does not quote any person specifically? It just said we spoke to sources. It provides no evidence. Have you ever seen that in your practice?
No, the answer is no. And the worst part about it is the so-called sources are giving information to him that conflicts with the facts that are concretely established in this country. I know who the shareholders of Wiglock is. All I have to do is check the financial statements. The Financial Secretary did an affidavit for us with the West Indies oil matter about the financial statements of statutory boards, and in particular NAMCO. There are no shares there belonging to the Prime Minister. This thing about Chofsky, I mean, just let the public get into their minds. The Prime Minister is fighting to extradite a fugitive back to India. And this man writes that this investigator is being told by sources in Antigua and Barbuda that the Prime Minister is being paid to protect Chofsky. And I know for a fact that the Prime Minister has told me the quicker I can get him out of here, the better. But we've been slowed down in the legislation.
In fact, Chofsky joined me in one of his litigations, going after me. That's so, Counsel? Senior Counsel?
I didn't hear what you said, Pierre.
Chofsky tried to join me in one of his litigations.
Yes.
He's trying to sue you, and the document is saying that
you're trying to protect him. In relation to the revocation of the passport.
Okay. I have to get to Financial Secretary, but let's go back to, for those members of our audience who are just joining us, let's go back to what Mr. Hayes, who describes himself as an investigator, James T. Hayes Jr., who has made a declaration in support of the request for filing or request for disclosure by Yulia Gureva-Motlakov. We'll put back those graphics in terms of what he said as the preamble to his declaration.
I'm glad you're doing this because I want to comment on it as well.
He says, quote, except as otherwise indicated, all statements in this declaration are based upon my personal knowledge and experience or upon my discussion with or review of work product of other investigators working on behalf of the applicant, that is Yulia Gureva-Motlakov, as directed by applicant's counsel in the course of the Antiguan investigation. He also says, quote, unless otherwise publicly disclosed, this declaration does not reveal the identities of sources who have spoken to applicants' investigators, end quote. He also says, insofar as they are within my knowledge, the facts and matters set forth herein are, to the best of my own knowledge and belief, true, end quote. So that's what Mr. Hayes, who is the author of the declaration, has indicated. We have seen no evidence that he's provided. If he had provided the evidence, we assure you, we would have made it available on this show.
No, but there's something else you have to put. He made in the last sentence, and to the extent that, to my personal knowledge, they are true to my whatever it is, to my, there is not a single fact in this document that he has stated as a fact based on his personal knowledge. And he can't, because he has no knowledge of what's happening in, in Antigua and Barbuda. And it is clear from his dragging the David Dorset, Rioch, CIP, Chofsky, and talking about violating the Venezuelan sanctions when West Indies Oil, and I confirm that with the CEO, has not imported any fuel since March 2012.
Yes.
So he has no facts in this document from his personal law that he can say that I saw, I heard, I smelled, I touched, nothing like that. Everything is based on investigators in Dubai, investigators in Antigua, opposition forces, politicians say, I heard the politicians say so, and so on and so on. And he quoted Pringle talking about Namco and so on. And I think it's a sorry day, it's a sorry time. These are sorry times when opposition forces would collaborate with that sort of thing. When they must know, they have to know the struggles we've had with Chofsky.
You know, Tony, I see that as a form of treason, yeah? I spoke about sedition earlier, in which they're trying to plunge the country into chaos and confusion, feeding our people a lot of misinformation, making up stories about our government plundering public resources, which is not true. But yeah, when you can go as far as joining foreign forces in order to undermine the country, I see that as an act of treason.
Okay. Financial Secretary, coming back to you as I promised, the document that you've prepared, and again, let's indicate, let's reiterate for the audience, this is a document you provided, you created in relation to the receipt of the funds and how the funds were spent.
Yes.
Are you saying to absolutely lucidly clear that you have, if needs be, the ECCB, the central bank, can provide documentary evidence of all that you're saying here?
Yes. As it relates to the receipt of the funds, without question, there is confirmation of receipt. There's information that we would get from central bank to show when our account is credited. And the amounts that are indicated in the document would be there in that evidence. As it relates to payments, now, again, this is information that has been provided. For every single transaction that's listed here, there's a receipt, there's a payment instruction, there's whatever would be required when you make a payment according to government's record-keeping requirements. That is there. And it would name who would have received the funds, how much, and when.
Was this a special fund that this was put into, or was it put into a fund with other funds?
It was placed into our general, what's called our call account at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. So whenever we are receiving payments, whether we're getting a loan payment, for instance, from CDB, or from Abu Dhabi, wherever we're receiving funds from, for the most part, we would have those funds deposited in our call account. Sometimes it would come to our accounts in Antigua, but generally for these payments, we would have them deposited to our call account. And then the accountant general makes payments based on instruction from that account.
If these funds were to be cleared or checked by the U.S. authorities, the ECCB would be able to also provide them with all the information you're saying here?
Certainly, yes, yes.
Now, let me make another point here. I'm a politically exposed person. So is my wife and my son. Where would we be able to bank $10 million? Which bank anywhere on the planet will accept $10 million US directly or indirectly from me or any agent? I mean, recognizing too, it's from the sale of a sanctioned vessel. First of all, I can give an example. When Mr. Halley had first shown an interest in Alfa Nero, even before we went to the bid, Mr. Halley sent $10 million US to try and jump ahead of the others, and the funds were seized. So if 10 million, one is not true, but I'm just asking, which bank would have accepted this 10 million? How do you hide $10 million? And if the contract states 40 million, what will be the motivation for somebody to pay 10 million excess of the contract amount? It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't add up. And again, as I said, this additional 10 million came about because we provided irrefutable evidence to include all the supporting transfers, confirming that 40 million was received, how the $40 million is spent, and then this changed the stories because the original story was that 10 of the 40 million could not be accounted for. So again, it's a total fabrication.
Back to Financial Secretary, coming back to you, City Council. Financial Secretary, in relation to the involvement of correspondent banks, and for example, the overseas clearinghouses, they would also have to get involved in this, correct?
Certainly. I think what I would say is this. Again, documentation provided would show the correspondent bank or the bank to which funds would get to the ECCB is the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. And again, the documentation shows that.
If there was any challenge, given that this was a sanctioned vessel and it had to be cleared by the Office of Foreign Assets Control in the Treasury Department, OFAC, if there was any challenge with the funds or any discrepancy, who would have raised the red flag? Would it have been the Federal Reserve Bank?
Clearly.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, it would not have gotten account.
Precisely.
Yeah. You were saying...
Yeah. Now the opposition have no standing or no authority to conduct any form of inquiry, but it goes on specifically, according to sources that spoke with applicants, investigators, members of Bronx Inner Circle offered portions of sale proceeds for spending in the opposition constituencies in return for halting further inquiry into the circumstances of the sale and possible commission. Who in their right mind could read something?
And, you know, I personally heard Digital Isaac. Someone sent me a tape of Digital Isaac saying on Crusader Radio, whatever the name is, that one morning she got up at 5:30, 6 a.m., still in an IT, and somebody from the Labour Party, or from the cabinet for that matter, called her to ask her how much money need to be spent in the respective constituencies. Again, a total fabrication. So when we pointed out members of the opposition colluding with these foreign entities to defame and to undermine the country, this is factual. We're not speculating whether or not Digital Isaac and Pringle and so on are involved. We know that to be factual because, again, that very statement, Senior Counsel, that is documented there, Digital Isaac has actually stated it.
They're the same thing, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Prime Minister. Thanks, Senior Counsel, and thanks, Financial Secretary. Let's go to the telephones now, 462-2996, 462-2996. We're also able to get your comment, your questions on Facebook as well. Of course, as we said, there might be the temptation to be adversarial, to be wisecracking, to try to get the comment with the most likes. That's not this kind of show. This show is about facts, evidence, cerebral analysis, not sensationalist hype or gossip. This is not this show. If you want that, you might try radio tomorrow, not this show. So, 462-2996, if you have a question, please keep it brief, concise. Anything that we have not touched, anything that you want clarity on, Prime Minister, Financial Secretary, and Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan are here. We also have, so that's 462-2996. We also have our Facebook page as well that you can ask your question there. Please, again, keep it concise, keep it brief. We'll have it answered. We're adding light, not heat to this discussion. It's not one of those programs that you can come and say what you like without any evidence. Please, be guided. All right, so we're going to be getting to the phone lines in a short while. Senior Counsel, in relation to, is there any sort of, as we get our first call coming in, is there any indication that anybody, whether it's Yulia Guriev-Motlakov or her father, Andrei Grigorovich Guriev, have any documentary evidence of anything supporting their view?
Not at all, and it's not the first time this has happened, you know.
Could I ask you to hold the point, please? Let's go to the telephone lines first. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us on Alfa Nero Files. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Mrs. Stafford.
Good evening to you.
Senior Counsel, Mrs. Crumb, and Prime Minister. What is the reason that Alfa Nero was in St. Martin? It was sanctioned and it came here, the flag. Why, and came in our waters? Why? For what reason?
Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Telemark was there, but he went away. I think he would be the best one to answer that.
Okay, thank you so much for the call. Thank you so much for the question. Senior Counsel, you want to take that?
Well, Mr. Telemark explained it before he came off the set. He was saying because of the European sanctions imposed on the Russian oligarch's family, they came to what they thought was a non-European safe haven, so to speak. And while it was there, it was sanctioned by the Americans with the imposition of a block property sanction. And so they couldn't touch it. They thought they could have gotten away here, but they didn't, because the FBI, as the Prime Minister indicated, searched it early in the year 2021, right? 2022, sorry. And then subsequent to that, the sanctions came. And it couldn't move again, so it came seeking refuge, but it got caught in the net of sanctions.
Okay.
The net of sanctions.
Thank you so much. Let's go back to the telephone lines. We'll try to take as many calls as possible. Very short. Keep your questions short, please. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, please. Good night, caller.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you now. Please proceed.
Hi. Good night, Prime Minister. Good night, Financial Secretary. Good night.
Good evening.
I do have a question about the document that you're showing related to proceeds used. There seems to be an initial deposit in July and then another in September, 2.2. I was curious why those two deposits were split, and maybe there's a reason why they are separate deposits.
Thank you so much for the call. Really appreciate it, Financial Secretary.
I believe that might have been a result of the agreement between the broker and the...
Well, a deposit was made initially, and what the broker did, the broker took out the full amount of their commission from the initial deposit. I think it was at 4 million, and they took out the 1.8. So that 2.2 was from the initial 10% that was paid down. And then they made whole the balance of 36 million.
Okay, thank you, caller. Let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Your question, please.
Hello?
Hello, good night. Your questions, please.
Okay.
Are you listening to your television? So, okay, we're going to come back to you because you're listening to your television. We're going to ask the callers, when you call, just turn down your television or your radio. It's going to cause a delay and it's going to confuse you because there's a 3 or 4 second delay. All right, please. So when you call, just turn down your radio or your television and let's listen through the phone, please. We're going to get back to the telephone lines in a short while. You can also ask your question on Facebook as well. So you can, as I said, we're trying to get as many questions as possible. Fair and balanced discussion. We are interested in facts, evidence, cerebral analysis, not histrionics, not emotion, all facts. Okay, let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening. The question I have to ask, right? Would it be instructive for us to see a copy of the check that you guys received for the Alfa Nero?
Financial Secretary will respond. Thank you so much for the call, Financial Secretary.
Yes, there's no check. This was done via electronic transfer, as we mentioned, from the buyer to the broker through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and to our account at Central Bank. So there's no check that we can, bring out and say this is the check that was written.
But you have the transfer
But
instructions.
we have the transfer
which you
instructions, and we also have, as I said, the confirmation of receipt that shows where the funds came from, coming through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and to our account at the Central Bank. So that documentation is there. That's as close to a check, I guess, that you can get.
And it's in the public domain.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Thank you, caller. So an electronic transfer, not a check. Let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Hello, good night.
Good night.
Yes, good night. This is Sancha. I just want to ask my PM, when can I come down to Point to come and release my song? It's out on the media. I want to come and release my song. Can you?
Okay, all right. Sorry. This is not the call. This is not the program for that. So you could probably talk with the Prime Minister another time on another show. All right. So we're focusing on the Alfa Nero Files That's not the discussion for here, all right? We're going to go back to the telephone lines in a short while, 4622996, and we can also take your questions as well on Facebook. We'll put those questions up on our screen for those who are asking questions on Facebook. As I said, still with us, Prime Minister Brown, Financial Secretary Rosanna Davis-Crump, and Cedar Coast Anthony Asfel. Let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
I was wondering if there's like a website that we can just access whatever documents are related to the case that they're talking about right now, because I joined late.
So, sorry, just ask your question again, please. We missed the first one.
Like a website or something that we can view the documents related to.
Okay, thank you, caller. Prime Minister.
Yes, federal court. It's a public document filed with the New York Federal Court. So you can go on their website and you can pull down the document. But the document has been circulated by members of the opposition, so just call anyone and they'll get it to you.
In relation as well, Prime Minister and Financial Secretary and Senior Counsel, in relation to, so for example, for the documents that we're showing now that the government has released, is there, where can people find those? In other words, the apostille and the bill of sale and so on. Is there somewhere that individuals can find those documents?
Well, we'd have shared them tonight. I have published them on Point FM. I've published them on my Facebook page. And maybe we probably need to get them up on the government website. In fact, you know what I'll do? The next sitting of Parliament, I will file all of the documents in the Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda. In fact, I'll also file the unredacted version of all of the wire transfers, because there's really nothing to hide, with the understanding that if anyone goes to the Parliament and gets the information, that the Parliament will then redact the information. But for the sake of transparency, we will file the unredacted version of those transfers. So there'll be further discussion in Parliament on that issue, and we will certainly file the documents within the Parliament of Antigua and Barbuda, which will be available for public discussions. Not only that, individuals who would like to have the information can also write on the Freedom of Information Act to get all of the supporting documents. And this is not classified information. We'll make the information available. Another thing that we will do after this request for disclosure is dismissed, we will also file publicly our intervention that we would have made. That intervention will be formally made tomorrow in the New York court, federal court.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Prime Minister. Good night, Bufford, and the rest of the panel. Mr. Prime Minister, why when you find out that the boat was sanctioned, you never tell them to get the boat out of Antigua? Because is Russia, you know, Russia one place for Putin and one very dangerous man. So, you know, want to hold on for nothing for Putin and get mixed up with Russia.
Right. So I don't know if you, Carl, I don't know if you were listening to the program earlier. We would have indicated the risk of having the boat here, the cost, $5 million a year, and potentially that boat, if it had stayed there for a few more years, it would end up being a net liability to the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. We spoke about the possibility of the boat sinking within the Falmouth Harbour Marina, creating significant problems, not only the cost of removing it, but also the literal closure of the most lucrative yachting area on the island. The risks were just too great to keep that boat here, considering that it was not insured, considering too that if we had left it unmanned, that the boat clearly would have sank. So again, the only option, viable option that was available to us was to sell the boat, and that is precisely what we did.
All right, thanks so much. So let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a quick question. I understand there were two other boats in addition to Alfa Nero that were here during the period. What was the difference in the fact that the other two were allowed to leave if they were also under sanction and one was kept? What's the difference between
I am not aware that there were any sanctioned boats. The only sanctioned boat I'm aware of is Alfa Nero.
That's my understanding.
Caller, do you know what evidence do you have that there were two other boats now that they were sanctioned? Oh, I think we lost the caller. All right.
Again, I want to make it abundantly clear that it was never brought to my attention and certainly to the cabinet that there were any other sanctioned boats in Antigua. The only one that was brought to our attention was the Alfa Nero. If that person can tell us where this boat was docked, and unless there were sanctioned boats and they slipped through the notice of U.S. authorities, European authorities, but we're not aware of that.
All right. Thanks, Prime Minister. And of course, we still have Darwin Telemak in the studio. He's not on our set, but in the studio. If needs be, we can also get him to respond to your question as well a bit later on. Of course, we're not. This is about absolute fair and balanced discussions. We are making sure that if you have a question, if you have a concern, if you're not clear on something, we're trying to get all of that information for you. All right.
But let me make another point here. If indeed that there were 2 other boats that were sanctioned and the individuals, the owners got them out, then perhaps the Alfa Nero owners should have done the same thing.
Let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good night.
Yeah. Well, if America sanctioned the boat, why y'all didn't send the boat to Virgin Island or Puerto Rico and keep Antigua out of this?
Thank you, caller. Really appreciate it.
Again, Mr. Telemak would have indicated that we had no possibility of moving that boat to the sanctioned boat. And when the sanction was actually removed, it was not to sail it to any U.S. port, it was to sell it. Those are the negotiations that took place with the Antiguan government and the U.S. government.
All right, caller, thank you so much for that. We're keeping those questions short. We're keeping the answers short as well, making sure that you can get in as many as possible. Let's go back to the telephone lines, 462-2996. Good night, caller. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello, good night. I have one question to the PM. Since you were not the one who directly dealt with the negotiations, is it at all possible that Mr. Telemak would have had some sort of underhand dealings that you are not aware about? And my second part is, could we not...
She has a second question. Go ahead with the second part of your question, please. Oh, okay, all right.
I think that's a very unfortunate piece of speculation there. And I believe that I can vouch for the integrity of Darwin Telemak. And again, how would Darwin Telemak move $10 million US to put in which bank? Where? In Mars? On Mars?
To be clear, there's been any such indication, not one scintilla of evidence, that there was any impropriety on the part of Mr. Telemak.
I'll make the point here too that Mr. Telemak would have brought Mr. Yildirim to me as well. He would have addressed the cabinet on the issue. As I said, Mr. Yildirim started at $25 million US until he got up to 40, and Mr. Telemak had kept myself and the entire cabinet informed. So he did not make the decision on his own.
Okay, Mr. Telemak also joins us in set. Mr. Telemak, could you also respond?
Yes, I think very unfortunate question, but I think this whole environment is leading to these sort of questions. Here's a fundamental fact. The person who actually brought Mr. Yildirim to us was a broker. The fact that the broker got a deposit of $4 million into their account, which is 10% of the selling price. Now that 4% was not sent by us. It was sent by Mr. Yildirim. Mr. Yildirim sent 10% of the sale price to his broker. His broker did not want the government to pay them because they figured they may not, for whatever reason, get paid. Mr. Yildirim sent $4 million, which is 10% of 40. So that issue dies right there.
Sure.
The owner sent the percentage equal to what was supposed to have been sent to the broker, which is $4 million. Therefore, the boat was sold for $40 million. The broker took 1.8, and what he did was Mr. Yildirim sent directly to the Treasury $38 million. The other $2.2 million came from the broker. So we got paid by two different people. 38 from Mr. Yildirim, 36 from Mr. Yildirim, sorry, and 2.2 from the broker. $40 million adds up right there. There's no question that we got $40 million.
Okay, let's go back to the telephone lines. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
This specific law that passed in the Parliament from the Port Authority to sell the Alfa Nero. How much vote ever to that?
What was the question?
Sorry, we didn't hear the last part of the question.
That's the only vote ever sell, right?
So, sorry, could you repeat the question? We're not quite getting what you said.
I said, this law that you go to Parliament to pass, to give the Port Authority all right to sell anything, any boat that you see abandoned. This is the only boat ever sell?
Mr. Tillman, thank you, caller. Appreciate it.
Caller, this was since the amendment of the Port Act, which was 38A was passed, we've sold the Alfa Nero. Within about 2 or 3 weeks, there's another vessel that we have, that the police have actually held on to with the Coast Guard, and we're going to be putting out the notices to the owners in accordance with 38A, 10 days notice like we did on the Alfa Nero, and that will be auctioned as well. So the law is being applied as we find, generally, as we find the opportunities to implement that law.
But Mr. Garfield,
yes, please.
I don't know what point you would like me to make this. The caller, the female caller who spoke about Mr. Telemark, epitomizes the grave danger to our democracies of misinformation. I just need a couple of minutes to
probably don't have too long, but if you can just give us a couple
seconds. The United Progressive Party spent 10 years from 2004 to 2014, millions of dollars worth of investigative fees to send to jail former ministers of the Labour Party's government. 10 years, nothing happened. We're seeing the same thing taking place again, misinformation. Misinformation is the greatest threat to our democracy that we have. As we saw it almost in the last election, when the government almost lost the government because they believed this Prime Minister had $4 billion in his cellar at his home.
Billion.
Billion, I meant, sorry, 4 billion.
Plus they said FBI wanted me as wanted by FBI.
And you will be shocked, like this young lady who just called, how many people actually believe that without conceptualizing what $4 billion would look at.
Okay, let's go back to the telephone lines. Thank you so much to the council. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Mr. Prime Minister, what am I saying, right? When you find out that the board and the sanction, why you never just send it to St. Croix or send it to St. Thomas instead of...
Caller, we answered it. Yes, that question was asked and answered. Thank you, caller. Really appreciate it. That question was asked and answered. All right. So again, making sure that we're able to get as many questions as possible and keeping them short, keeping the questions short and the responses short. Again, this program is about fact, evidence, cerebral analysis, not emotion. We're adding light, not heat. So if you have a genuine question, without innuendos, without any sort of speculation, please, this is the program for it. If you want to engage in histrionics, tomorrow on radio might be that program for it. Okay, we're going to go back to the telephone lines in a short while. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please. Caller? Okay, all right, we're going to get that caller back in shortly. Yes, caller, go ahead, please. Good night.
Hello. Good night.
Good night.
Mr. Telemark, this morning I heard Isaac saying that you called one morning after 7 and asked you about if the candidates for the UPP would like to get help in their constituencies. You could help them disperse some of the money of Alfa Nero. Did you ever call Ms. Isaac about anything like that?
I don't ever remember calling Ms. Isaac about anything like that. I can tell you that I met the day after we sold the vessel. I did meet Mr. Pringle, I think, and Mr. Bowens. I mean, jokingly, I said to them that, hey, we sold the boat. I mean, we're all happy we sold the boat. And I did say to them, well, maybe you should see if you can get some of them funds to help with what you're doing. That was a pretty jokey statement. Nothing.
You're saying it in jest.
Well, that's unfortunate. You know, using it against you.
Yeah, I mean,
even though you had no such authority determining how resources are allocated,
exactly.
So you may want to be careful in the future, especially when you deal with evil people.
All right, we're going to get to another phone call. Thank you so much, Mr. Telemack, for that. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, good night to the panel.
Good night.
And you to the host, you're my legend, you know.
Sorry?
You're my legend. To the world boss.
Okay.
But man, it's only a foolish dog barks at the flying outside.
Outside.
You have a question, caller? Oh, I think he just we just went outside without a question.
Tell me, like, you sure you didn't call Giselle at 5 a.m. in the morning?
I don't even know how to call Giselle.
All right. That's why this program is about absolutely keeping it real and making sure that we have all the information available. We did promise you a fair and balanced discussion. We did promise you that we'll keep to the facts, we'll keep to the evidence. We only speak about what we know, not what we are speculating or what other people are speculating. Good night, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello, good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night to the PM and to the panel.
Good night.
Question that I have, was there, at the time of the sanctioning from the U.S. government of the Russian boat, was there another alternative? I know there was a question posed, but was there another alternative other than the Antiguan government seizing that boat? Was there any thoughts, consideration from the government other than seizing the boat? Was it possible that the U.S. Government could have come and taken the expenses of having the boat removed from our port? Because I know the Prime Minister made mention that it would have cost us to have the boat moved. But the U.S. government, being that they sanctioned the boat, couldn't they have taken that onus of removing the boat and selling it to whatever other island that they see in? Thank you.
They would have no such jurisdiction. In fact, boats have been seized all over the world, and what would have happened is that the host country would have covered the costs. I believe we're the only small island state that would have ended up in a situation in which we had a super yacht that was sanctioned. And as I said, it was beyond our means to pay $5 million or more yearly. And you see, in the United States, for example, they have seized a number of them. And my understanding is that it's costing tens of millions of dollars annually. They can afford those payments, but they would not have the type of jurisdiction to, let's say, dictate that the yacht be sent to them. And I don't know if they would want the liability either. And it is because they understood, by the way, we had to make the case to get the sanctions lifted so we could sell the boat. We would have explained to them the potential environmental problems, economic problems, and the costs. We would have indicated to them that there's no way that this small state could accommodate a sanctioned vessel that you could not move, a vessel that was uninsured, a vessel that was not flagged, and that there was a need for us to acquire the vessel so that we could sell it, and certainly to resolve what would have been a fundamental liability for the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. And the problem we could have had down the road too, if it is that the vessel had stayed here for 5, 6, 7 years, because 4 years later, the sanctions are still on. And then the boat deteriorated. Maybe if it sank, they probably sue the government for contributory negligence. We may not have ended there. Even this idea that the money should have been sent to Ukraine, that is just such a foolish idea. Because let's say, for example, we were to lose the litigation and we had to pay back the money. When you don't send it to Ukraine, where are you going to get the money to pay it from? Paid back. At least we can say that we have used the proceeds to pay down debt. So if you had to pay back the net $30 million or $29 million that we got, we would not have lost anything. You understand? So I think that we have taken a sensible decision to secure the public interest and to guard against those potentialities of the boat becoming a fundamental liability for the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. And again, as I said, it was the best option. And of all the discussions that I've heard for the last maybe year or more, no one has come up with any proposal or any decision that would have been superior to the one that we took.
Sure. The boat came here, and the boat was abandoned. The boat was sanctioned, and it was delisted, it was deregistered, and uninsured. So moving it became impossible. Right. The crew was on board, and the crew said, we're about to leave because we have no more food, no more money. So they were keeping it alive, and they were about to leave, and it was going to die. The decision was made by the government to reduce the risk by getting rid of the vessel. At that point, the vessel was still blocked. So still a blocked asset, which means that the provisions that within 38A did not guarantee that we were going to get the funds, when we began the process of trying to move it from the harbor, it was going to go to a U.S. account, blocked account.
Correct.
The effort was made during that time to try to see how that could be undone, and the government made the necessary arrangement with the U.S. government to do that. But on the morning of the auction, the property was still blocked. It was that morning that the U.S. government sent in notification while we were, so we made all provisions to auction the vessel, to move it, knowing fully well that potentially that money is going into a blocked account. And it was only during that period that the notification came from surrounders to us that says, okay, the U.S. government says that the Antigua government can hold on to it.
Precisely. Okay, we're pretty much out of time, Prime Minister, FLS, Senior Counsel, Port Manager, but I literally can give you 30 seconds apiece for your final comments, starting with the Prime Minister.
Right. Well, again, you know, there's nothing to worry about here. The request for disclosure does not represent Prime Minister or any of the parties going to trial. There's no judgment against us. There's no ruling against us. This is just a witch hunt, literally a fishing expedition in which members of the opposition have colluded with foreign forces to try and defame and certainly to libel me, or for that matter, to slander me for that matter, and other members of my family. And I just want to reassure the people of Antigua and Barbuda that we have acted with probity, that we have accounted for all of the proceeds, and that all of the allegations, and I emphasize all of the allegations, are false. Again, I want to reiterate, I have no assets abroad, no bank accounts, no properties in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Australia, no part of the world. And whatever assets I have here are assets that I continue to use to make an economic contribution in addition to the political contribution that I'm making. And I'm as transparent as they come. And again, I do not indulge in illegal activities. And I want to ask you know, the members of the opposition in particular to be a little more measured in the opposition and not to get involved in this type of destructive behavior in which you know, they are literally siding with others to destroy Antigua and Barbuda. I mean, some may find it funny that they have you know, come with all these frivolous arguments, and they're trying to defame me and my family members. But at the end of the day, it is the country that they're hurting, because you know, the consequences primarily for the country in terms of any knee-jerk reaction of any stakeholder, maybe corresponding banks or even others who may even investors who may believe that there's some truth to these allegations and may decide not to do business with us. And I think too that we have to hold Antiguans and Barbudans, especially you know, those who want to dispose us and to replace us, hold them responsible for their behaviors. I think this is totally inappropriate for them to be fabricating stories and to be planting information in the international media, while at the same time taking these kind of frivolous arguments to the court. And I'm quite sure, absolutely sure, that this issue, the intervention that we're making tomorrow, that it will bring an end to this issue, that there will be no disclosure, and at the same time, that there will be no subpoenas, that will be quashed. I'm absolutely confident about it, because the information that they filed, it is frivolous and vexatious, all of it, frivolous and vexatious.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Financial Secretary? I think Prime Minister would have taken some of your 30 seconds so you can give
All
short.
I would indicate is we've provided the information as it relates to how the funds were spent, all documentation. So there's a report that will be submitted to Cabinet that has every supporting document. And as Prime Minister says, he's going to present this information in Parliament. So if anyone is interested in seeing what the facts are, it will be there.
Thank you, Financial Secretary. Senior Counsel.
Yeah. My position is very simple. Misinformation is the greatest threat to our democracies that we'll probably see for the foreseeable future. And those with the facts, like a show like tonight, have an obligation to the public to come out and tell the facts as they are. If we don't do that, we'll be subsumed with misinformation, which the House of Lords in a case involving the Premier of Ireland and London Times said that the misinformation, the deliberate dissemination of falsehoods and intentional dissemination of lies is the greatest threat to the democratic process, the public interest, and even the right to vote, because you don't know if you go in the witness box whether you're going to be voting because of the 4 billion or the progress made by the country. And it's a serious problem we have in this country, in these countries in the OECS, and we have to be extremely vigilant to ensure that this virus of misinformation does not subsume all of us. Some of us have to stand up and speak. Like that phone call the young lady made about Darwin telling her, out of the blue, something like that comes because she believes it, that something happened. She hears tonight, it's not the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister didn't take any money. So let's shift the burden to Darwin, and maybe other people will enjoy listening. So tomorrow is going to be Darwin again.
Yeah. All right, a final comment to Darwin. 30 seconds, please.
Well, I feel I'm tasked with ensuring that safety of navigation into all our harbors is something that the public and the international community can enjoy. We had a risk. We did our best to remove that risk, and we are satisfied that that risk is gone, and that's the extent of my responsibility.
Thank you so much. Prime Minister Honorable Gaston Brown, Finance Minister, thank you so much. Financial Secretary, Rosanna Davis-Crump, thank you so much. Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan, appreciate it. And Port Manager Darwin Talamac, all of you have been fantastic being with us on our show for 2 hours. This has been a special edition of ABS Presents the Alfa Nero Files. So we're interested in provable details, not salacious pontification. This is what separates journalism from gossip. And we invite you that inasmuch as we were able to give light and not heat to this discussion, focusing on facts, what we know, what we can prove, we ask you to do the same. Let's try to ensure that there is a greater level of debate and discourse in the society. That when you hear something, ask, where did it come from? Who are the sources of this information? Let's try to have that level of discussion, cerebral analysis, evidence-based information and analysis. Let's focus on that. And of course, if that is the way that we are being a marionette, let's be a marionette of the facts and evidence. Perhaps for some radio commentators, you should also try to emulate that. Good night. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Garfield Burford on behalf of the entire team. Good night from the Alfa Nero Files and from ABS TV Presents. Bye-bye.